My name is Elena Martin. I'm 29, a software engineer, financially stable, independent, and deeply aware that none of that matters when your entire family decides you're the villain. It started with a phone call. My mother's voice was sharp, already teetering on the edge of outrage. "He needs you, Elena. Your brother is dying. You're the only match." The words spilled out before I could process them, like she'd already written the script and expected me to read my lines. I said I needed time. She called that selfish. I said I wanted to talk to a doctor. She said I was stalling. And when I asked for medical documents to review before signing anything, she snapped, "You always make everything about yourself." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But the next day I was summoned. That's the word they used. My father sent a car. No explanation. Just a message. "Come to St. Vincent's. We'll talk in person." I knew better than to go alone. So I texted my attorney friend Mara, told her to keep her phone on. Then I got in the car. The hospital lobby was too quiet for a Tuesday. A nurse behind the front desk glanced up when I entered. Her eyes flicked to something behind me, probably my mother already waiting. And there she was, seated in the waiting area, with a folder clutched in one hand. Her lips were pressed tight, like she'd rehearsed her fury, but was saving it for the right moment. My father stood nearby, arms crossed, a human statue of silent disapproval. Between them was a clipboard already prepared. "Consent to organ donation." I took a step back. Not out of fear, out of instinct. "What is this?" My mother stood sharp and sudden. "What do you think this is? Lucas is dying. He needs a kidney and you're a match. You're gonna sign this." I hadn't agreed to anything, not one word. And yet the paperwork was filled in. My name, my date of birth, boxes pre-checked. All they needed was a signature. I looked at my father. He didn't blink. He said it like a closing argument. "You owe us. We raised you. We paid for your school. You'd be nothing without this family." The anger rose, but I kept it quiet. "I want to speak to the transplant team. I want my medical records." That's when my mother lost control. She grabbed the folder from her lap, tore the papers in half, and let the pieces fall like snow to the floor. "You want your records, you want your damn papers, you're letting your brother die. Do you understand that?" People turned. A nurse dropped her pen. Someone gasped. I stood still. "Do it for your brother," she hissed. "My brother, Lucas. The same Lucas who used to lock me outside in the rain when we were kids. Who once broke my phone in high school because I got better grades. Who called me names behind my back and to my face. Who at age 17 told me I was lucky my parents kept me. I hadn't understood that at the time, but I did now. I looked her dead in the eyes. "No." Her face paled, then flushed red. My father stepped closer, voice low and venomous. "You're a disgrace. You let your own brother die." I didn't answer. I looked at the shredded paper scattered on the tile. Then I looked around at the strangers witnessing the show. I knew none of them would help. I didn't need them to. Because what they didn't know, what my parents didn't know, was that I had taken the test months ago. Quietly. Without drama. When I first heard Lucas was sick, I did the responsible thing. I contacted the National Kidney Donor Program. I submitted a full panel. I asked for a compatibility check. And I had received the results. I wasn't a match. More than that, I wasn't a sibling match. Biologically, genetically, I wasn't related to Lucas Martin at all. And the kicker, I wasn't their daughter either. Not really. But I stayed quiet. For now. Because I knew this wasn't about saving Lucas. It never was. This was about power, about control. And they thought they still had it. They didn't. I bent down slowly, picked up one of the torn pages. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted them to see that I was calm, controlled, prepared. The nurse behind the counter caught my eye again. She didn't speak, but her face said it all. She was watching the storm, and I was the only one not flinching. Because I wasn't afraid anymore, not of them, not of this, not of the truth. The day after the hospital confrontation, I didn't go into work. I didn't answer messages. I needed space to think. Space to breathe. I went back through every folder I had, every email, every receipt. The test I'd taken 6 months earlier wasn't some impulsive decision. It came after I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Lucas had collapsed during a business trip. Kidney failure, acute and advanced. Dialysis started immediately. Transplant needed urgently. When I received the call from Mom a week later, her tone wasn't grief. It was command. And that was the first time I felt it. The weight of something larger than a medical emergency. The weight of expectation without conversation. I remembered what she said. "We've always known you'd be the backup. That's what family is." The words stuck with me long after I hung up. So I went online. I filled out the donor application. I paid out of pocket to expedite the genetic and tissue compatibility tests. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want the noise. I wanted facts. The results came via secure email. October 9th. I remember the date, like I remember the taste of blood in my mouth the first time Lucas shoved me into the corner of a coffee table when I was 10, and Mom said, "Don't provoke him." The results didn't just say I wasn't a kidney match. They said I wasn't a partial match. There was zero compatibility, which is biologically impossible for full siblings. So I ran a full DNA report, used a third-party lab, double-blinded. And then the truth came through like sunlight cracking through dirty glass. I wasn't related to Lucas, and further analysis confirmed I wasn't biologically related to either of my parents either. I was adopted, secretly, without ever being told. No records, no papers, just an identity built on a lie. And when I thought back, I could see it. The subtle ways it was always there. Lucas calling me the leftover. My father once saying, "We didn't have to raise you, remember that." Mom's anger whenever I asked for boundaries. They raised me out of obligation. No, that's not quite right. They raised me as insurance. The perfect scenario, adopt a girl, raise her alongside your biological son. And one day, if he needed a part of her blood, bone marrow, organs, well, it's all in the family, isn't it? Until the parts didn't match. And suddenly the illusion cracked. I forwarded the test results to my friend Mara. Subject confirmation of incompatibility and lack of biological relation. I added, "I think they always knew." Her reply came less than 5 minutes later. "If this is true, you need to protect yourself immediately. Paper trail timestamp secure backup. Assume they'll try to twist this." And she was right. Because the next day I got another message. From the hospital. Not from a doctor, but from administration. They wanted to verify my consent for an upcoming donor preparation session scheduled for Friday. I hadn't scheduled anything. And yet, there was a signature on file from me. Except I hadn't signed anything. I drove straight to the hospital. This time, I brought Mara with me. At the admissions desk, I asked to see the authorization forms under my name. The receptionist hesitated, asked for ID. Then a manager appeared. We were led to a small consultation room. Inside was Dr. Janik, the transplant coordinator. He pulled up a screen. There it was. My name, my birth date, a digital signature, dated 2 days ago. "This says you agreed to be evaluated for transplant compatibility," he said. "I never signed that," I said evenly. "And I want a copy of whatever was submitted." He printed it out. I held the paper in my hand and stared. It was a scan of a consent form. The signature looked close, but not right. Not mine. "It was submitted by a family member," Dr. Janik added. "A Coraline Martin. She claimed she had your verbal consent and was submitting on your behalf." "She didn't." "I see," he said quietly. "Then this is a serious issue." "Very," Mara added. "That's a forged document. You're holding evidence of medical fraud." Dr. Janik nodded. His demeanor shifted less administrative, more cautious. "I'll escalate this to the ethics board and legal counsel immediately. This may delay the transplant discussions." "Good," I said. "Delay them forever if needed." We left the hospital with hard copies of everything, the form, the submission logs, the access timestamps. I scanned them all into cloud storage that night. And then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I filed a formal complaint against my own parents. For coercion, for fraud, for medical manipulation. I sent the documentation to the hospital's patient advocacy department copying Mara and requested an immediate review. Then I turned off my phone. For 2 days, I didn't respond to messages. There were voicemails, dozens. My mother crying, my father cold. Lucas, too. None of them denied it. None apologized. Just more of the same. How could you do this to us? You're heartless. You were never really one of us, were you? That last one stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I wasn't one of them, and I never had been. On the third morning, I woke to an email, hospital header, subject ethics board preliminary ruling. I opened it. They acknowledged the forged consent. They acknowledged the risk of coercion, and they formally halted all preparations for any transplant involving my name. They were launching an internal investigation. I sat on my couch, the email still open, and breathed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of them. I felt angry. Yes, but beneath that, I felt clear. They couldn't take anything from me anymore. They had tried to write my story, and now I had the pen. 2 days after the hospital confirmed they were launching an ethics investigation, my parents held a press conference. Not a formal one, not with cameras and media outlets, but enough of a gathering. They called it a community gratitude ceremony. St. Vincent's Medical Center put together a neat flyer. My mother's name was listed as the contact for press inquiries. A local news anchor was invited to host. According to the hospital's own announcement, the event was to celebrate an anonymous donor who had made a significant step toward saving a life. I wasn't mentioned, not once. I saw the livestream link on Facebook by accident, shared by someone from the neighborhood we grew up in. A family friend. I clicked on it. The banner behind the podium read, "A Gift of Love." Lucas appeared on a monitor screen from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. My mother stood at the podium next wearing a navy blue blazer and a pearl necklace she'd once refused to lend me for a job interview. "We're incredibly thankful for the donor's willingness," she said, voice unwavering. "In times of crisis, it's love that carries us through." My father took the mic after. "It's easy to tear families apart," he said, "but true character is shown in silence, in sacrifice. We're proud of our family. Sacrifice. Silence." I almost laughed. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting the story, turning it into a fairy tale about grace under fire, about unity, about gratitude. I paused. The video stood up from my desk and walked outside. The air was cool, early autumn creeping in. I paced for a moment, then pulled out my phone and called Mara. "They just went on live stream," I said, "pretending everything is fine." "You want to hit back now?" she asked. I looked down at the folder in my hand. Inside was everything. The test results, the forged document, the email log, my written statement. "They're trying to bury me," I said quietly, like I never existed. She didn't answer right away. "Then they can't, if you speak first." So I did. The next morning, I walked into the hospital not through the side entrance like last time, but through the main atrium. I wore a black blazer, my name badge clipped to my lapel. Elena Martin. No title, no apology. Just me. Mara was already inside waiting. She had arranged a brief speaking slot with the hospital's communications team. Not part of their official event, but allowable under their public comment policy. A few members of the press lingered. A few nurses, too. Some familiar faces from the transplant ward. I stepped up to the podium, unfolded the manila folder, and looked directly into the nearest camera. "My name is Elena Martin," I said. "You didn't hear that name yesterday, but you should have." Silence. I held up the first page. "This is a DNA report from the National Kidney Donor Program. It confirms that I am not a biological match for Lucas Martin." I held up the second. "This is a document submitted by my mother to the hospital falsely claiming my consent for donation. It's a forgery. My signature was copied. My rights were ignored." I paused, breath even. "I am not the anonymous donor. I am not even a compatible donor. I was never an option. My family knew that. And still they tried to force me." I looked out over the audience. My family did not ask for my help. They demanded it. They manipulated records. They made legal choices for me without my knowledge. And when I said no, they chose to pretend I didn't exist. Murmurs spread. I continued. I was adopted by the Martin family. I wasn't told. I wasn't given a choice. And now I understand why. Flashbulbs. Whispers. A reporter scribbled notes fast. They raised me as a backup. A what if, a spare. I held up the last page. My name is Elena Martin. I am not a donor. I am not a villain. I am not invisible. I stepped away from the microphone. Behind me, someone gasped. Later, I'd learn it was my mother who had entered from the back of the room just in time to hear the final sentence. She didn't faint, not like in the stories, but she staggered, and someone caught her arm. I didn't look back. I walked straight out through the front doors, the folder still in my hand. That night, my inbox exploded. Messages from strangers, from lawyers, from advocacy groups, from other adoptees who had been lied to. But the one that stopped me cold came from an email address I hadn't seen in a decade. Subject line, I remember everything. It was from Claudia Torres, a girl I went to school with until she moved away in 10th grade. She had witnessed a fight between Lucas and me once. A bad one. The message was short. I still have the photo from that day. You were bleeding. I told the counselor. No one did anything. I'm so sorry. Attached was a scan of the photo. My face bruised, a small cut above my lip, date stamped in the corner. She wasn't lying. I stared at the image until the edges blurred, not from tears, just from the weight of finally being seen. I saved it. Then I forwarded it to Mara. She called within minutes. You okay? I'm angry, I said, but I'm also done hiding. Good, she replied, because it's time we talk about legal recourse. The next day we filed formal complaints with the hospital's legal department and the state medical board. We submitted all documents, all timestamps, all audio files. We filed for a restraining order against both Coraline and Merrick Martin. When the hospital's general counsel called me to confirm receipt, she asked, "Would you be willing to speak publicly about this?" "I already have," I said. "And I'm not stopping now." She paused, then added something I wasn't expecting. Several staff members witnessed the forgery and coercion. Quietly, they support you. One nurse even submitted a statement on your behalf. It took everything in me not to cry right then. They had tried to isolate me, but they hadn't succeeded. I was no longer alone. That weekend, I received a certified letter, postmarked from my family's lawyer, a cease and desist notice. They claimed I was defaming them. I sent it straight to Mara. Her reply, "Let them try." Truth is an absolute defense. We went public with everything. On Monday morning, an investigative piece aired on a major news site. Woman uncovers family fraud after coercion for organ donation. Within 24 hours, hospital administrators released a formal statement acknowledging serious ethical violations and confirming that an internal review had led to policy changes in donor consent procedures. Coraline and Merrick went silent. Lucas. He was discharged later that month, still on dialysis, still bitter, still pretending he was the victim. He sent me one message, one line. "Hope you're happy ruining our family." I didn't respond, not because I didn't know what to say, but because nothing I said would matter to someone who never saw me as real to begin with. The next time I walked into St. Vincent's, it was to file the final statement with the ethics board. I carried no folder, no documents, just my voice. I sat before the panel, spoke clearly, and ended with this. This was never about revenge. It was about boundaries, about truth, about not being used. When I stood to leave, one of the panelists, an older woman, nodded slowly. "You're brave," she said. I didn't feel brave. Not exactly. I felt whole. That night, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No signature. Just one line. "You reminded me I don't have to say yes just to be loved." I placed it in a drawer labeled "Keep," because that's what this was all about. Not punishment, not pity, but proof. That I existed, that I mattered, that I was no one's backup plan. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. The online discourse shifted to another scandal, another story, as it always does. But my life didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. There was no normal to return to. What I had thought was a family was gone. Not in the physical sense they were still out there posting carefully curated updates, maintaining appearances, but the illusion, the part of me that still hoped something about us was real, had dissolved. I moved out of my apartment near the hospital. The lease had been temporary, and I didn't need to be close anymore. I found a smaller place across town, in a neighborhood with older trees, quiet cafes, and no memories. The first night there, I didn't unpack. I just sat on the floor in the living room and listened to nothing. No buzzing phone, no guilt humming at the edges. Just stillness. That's when I realized I had made it out. Not just physically, but emotionally. I was free. Free from the scripts they handed me since childhood. Free from the obligation I never agreed to. Free from the roles they wrote with no room for my name. My inbox still held the letter from Claudia, the photo of me at 14 with a bruised face. I opened it once more, then saved it into a folder marked Truth. Not evidence, just truth, because that's what mattered now, living with what was real. On a rainy Thursday morning, I went to the county clerk's office and filled out paperwork to legally change my name. Not because I wanted to erase everything, but because I wanted the choice. I didn't want to carry a last name that had been given like a chain. So I kept my first name Elena, but took my maternal grandmother's maiden name Reyes. A woman I had never met, but who, according to the few stories Mom let slip, was fierce, independent, and unapologetically difficult. I figured that was as close to blood as I was going to get. A week later, I got a call from Lucas. I let it ring twice before answering. He didn't bother with a greeting. "So you won," he said. "You destroyed everything." I exposed the truth. I replied calmly. "You humiliated us." "No," I said. "You did that yourselves. I just stopped cleaning up after it." There was silence. Then quietly, "They always loved you, you know." In their way. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "If love demands silence, it's not love." He hung up without another word. I stared at the phone in my hand for a while, then turned it off again. There were some conversations that didn't need to happen twice. Later that day, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from Oregon. Inside was a small card. A woman named Rebecca, age 17, said she had watched my story online, that she had grown up in a home where no always meant betrayal, that for the first time she felt like saying no was allowed. She wrote, "You didn't just protect yourself. You gave someone like me permission to protect myself too." No signature, just initials. I folded the card and placed it in a wooden box I kept near my desk. Not under legal, not under receipts, just under keepsakes. There's a difference between surviving something and living past it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding, not fast, not dramatically, but piece by piece. I started therapy. Real therapy, not just online searches or self-help books. I found a woman named Nina, mid-50s, sharp and kind. She didn't ask me to start from the beginning. She asked where it still hurt. That felt more useful. Some sessions I talked about the present. Some days we dug through the past. Once she asked me something simple. "What do you want to feel when you walk into a room?" I said, unapologetic. And we built from there. At night I wrote, not publicly, not yet, but privately, documenting everything. Not just what happened, but how it felt. How it shaped me, how I reclaimed myself. One entry ended with, "They tried to write my story in pencil. I rewrote it in ink." Another read, "They raised me out of fear, fear that something might happen to their real child. But I lived out of love, and I won't apologize for that." On the 1-month anniversary of the hospital confrontation, I returned to St. Vincent's not to fight, but to sit. There's a garden behind the oncology wing. I found a bench near the hydrangeas and sat in the same place I had stood that day before speaking. A nurse I didn't recognize walked past and smiled gently. "I remember you," she said. "You were brave." I didn't argue. I just nodded, because I finally believed it. Before leaving, I took a picture of the garden. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was quiet. And for years, I had lived in a storm of noise. Now peace was mine, and I wasn't giving it back. That evening, I opened my journal and wrote one last entry. Not an ending, not a conclusion, just a reminder I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth. And the truth, it was always mine. They just tried to bury it under obligation. Now it lives in the open. And so do I.